Hello everyone! I'm going to share to you 8 missionaries who served in the Seventh-day Adventist mission expansion. Number 1, Anna Knight. Anna Knight was born into a poor family of sharecroppers in Jasper County, Mississippi in 1874. Living in the deep south of America, not too long after the abolition of slavery, Anna and her family endured a considerable amount of prejudice on account of the color of their skin, despite the fact that they were now free. There were no schools for African American children and very little health care. But the Knight family were resilient, hardworking, and innovative, and Anna would offer to help the white children in her neighborhood with their chores in exchange for being taught how to read and write. Once Anna learned how to read and write, she began to read anything and everything she could get her hands on. One day, she came across an advertisement in one of the magazines she routinely devoured, offering readers the opportunity to receive free books in exchange for a subscription fee of 10 cents. She saved up her 10 cents and sent off the subscription fee. One of the packages she received as part of the subscription was a big parcel of magazines and books that had been sent to her by a Seventh-day Adventist. Later on, Edith Embry, another Seventh-day Adventist, began to send her copies of the Signs of the Times regularly. The content she read in the signs changed her heart, and she began to keep the Sabbath. This created a lot of tension between herself and her family. The family was in the habit of working on Saturday and keeping the Sabbath on Sunday. And when Anna began to keep Sabbath on Saturday, her family protested that she was lazing around Saturdays while everyone else was out working hard. Her mother demanded that she go out into the fields with her siblings on Saturday to plow fields and harvest cotton. Anna had a fiery temper and she stubbornly refused to yield her position. Often on a Saturday morning, Anna woke up at the crack of dawn. Arming herself with her Bible, Sabbath school lesson, and the family shotgun, she would make her way into the nearby woods. There, she would spend the entire day studying her Bible, praying and quietly communing with God. Her family situation didn't stop her from being faithful to God. A little while, Edith Embry sent her a copy of Steps to Christ, and Anna decided to get baptized. But the nearest Seventh-day Adventist church was 382 miles away in Graceville, Tennessee, and Edith Embry realized that Anna would need spiritual support and fellowship in order to thrive. With this in mind, Edith wrote to the Southern Missionary Tract Society, telling them about Anna, and Elder and Mrs. Chambers decided to take Anna under their wing to mentor her. She then went to Mount Vernon Academy, but faced significant challenges there because of the local prejudice against African Americans gaining an education. However, despite the challenges, Anna managed to complete her education at the academy and then moved on for further studies at Battle Creek College. In Battle Creek, Anna trained to become a nurse and was determined to return home to Mississippi to serve God in her hometown once she had graduated. Dr. Kellogg generously supplied her with the resources she needed to set herself up as a nurse and a health educator. And as an added bonus, he paid for her train tickets home as well. Once she returned to Mississippi, Anna restored an old broken-down cabin in Soso with the help of her family and began to run health education classes in a little health clinic, serving the surrounding towns in the country. The little center of influence Anna set up was soon a success, and people began to make significant changes in their diet and lifestyle as a result of her work. She also ran free Bible classes on the weekends, sharing the gospel with those who were interested. Her own family was convicted about the Sabbath as a result of her labors in so-so. Second missionary, Robert A. Caldwell. Adventism came to the Philippine shore in 1905. In August of that year, while in Singapore, Robert A. Caldwell, a literature evangelist missionary, received a call from the Adventist World Church headquarters in Maryland to go to the Philippines. He arrived in the same month in Manila. As his ship entered Manila Bay, he fixed his eyes for the first time on the great walled city with its teeming population. Seeing this, he was greatly moved and said, "I will sprinkle books, and then, like yeast, they will begin to work." This was the first mark of a tremendous story that is still being written in the lives of men and women in the Philippines. This was the beginning of Adventism in the islands of the Philippines. The work started in Manila with the unselfish efforts of the first foreign missionaries. In 1906, the McElhanneys and the Finsters actively continued the work in winning people for the Master in the Philippines. As fruit of their labors, Central Luzon Mission was organized to facilitate the gospel work among Filipinos in 1908. Hard work and dedicated ministry was considered worthwhile when on March 11, 1911, the first Adventist church in the Philippines was established at Santa Ana, Manila. It started with a membership consisting of 12 baptized converts, including 6 other Filipinos who were accepted by profession of faith, and 4 missionaries, the Finsters and the Caldwells. Then, L.V. Finster trained the first 3 Filipino pastors, namely Bibiano Panis, Leon Roda, and Emilio Manalaysay, who played significant roles in the history of the growth of Adventism in the islands. They were ordained to the gospel ministry of the Adventist Church in 1919. Panis shared the leadership of the work and even became the associate editor of Ang Tanglaw, The Lamp, one of the first evangelistic magazine subscriptions published in the dialect circulated throughout the country. The church expanded with Finster as administrator of the work in Manila. High in Vigan, Ilocos Sur, Fatibert and Stewart opened the work in Cebu City, and Adams with Jumada followed up the interest created by the young literature evangelist Ashbal in Haro, Iloilo, thus encircling the whole of Panay Island. Third missionary, Warren Eugene Howell. He was baptized in 1884 and received his BA from Battle Creek College in 1894 and an honorary MA from Emmanuel Missionary College in 1919. He was a student of history, Greek, and biblical interpretation, and author of Gospel Keywords and a Grammar Manual. He taught at Hillsburg College, and for 4 years he was principal of Palama Chinese School in Honolulu. He taught at Emmanuel Missionary College until 1903 and 1 year at Hillsburg College, where he was president for 2 years. He became the first president of the Loma Linda College of Evangelists, but after 1 year he was sent in 1907 as a Seventh-day Adventist missionary to Greece. Returning in 1909, he served as the principal of the Fireside Correspondence School for 4 years, and then for 4 years was assistant secretary, and then secretary for 12 years in the General Conference Department of Education, during which time he traveled widely in America and abroad. He was an associate editor and an editor of Christian Education, whose name was changed to Christian Educator in 1915, and Home and School in 1922, where he emphasized the SDA principles of education as advocated by Ellen White. Howell was chair of the committee appointed to revise the Book of Daniel and the Revelation, and the secretary of the Spirit of Missions Committee, which promoted and directed college and seminary mission language study. From 1930 until his death, he was secretary to the president of the General Conference. Fourth missionary, Griffith Jones. Griffith Jones was a British missionary born in Wales. He was captain of a British merchant vessel until 1893, when he read a tract fragment. Accepting the Seventh-day Adventist faith, he left seafaring and began a quest to become a medical missionary worker. Captain Jones and his wife Marian Valentine began searching for a mission preparatory school. Since there were no such schools in England, they wrote for information about those in America. They eventually chose the Industrial Institution in Keene, Texas, known as Keene Industrial Academy. According to a story in the Youth's Instructor, January 11, 1949, in the year 1900, they arrived in Texas to find the school of their choice out in a desolate, windswept area among small scrub oaks. There were only a few partially completed buildings, and teachers and students alike then lived in tiny, weather-beaten houses that were a far cry from the homes they had both left in England. However, they had purpose to make the best of whatever came, and they soon made themselves as comfortable as possible in one of the rural dwellings. When school opened, they both enrolled in the Bible instructor's course, but it was probably here that they obtained an even more important foundation for the work that lay ahead of them. Captain Jones and his wife learned to labor with their hands as perhaps they had never done before. In Keene, Captain and Mrs. Jones prepared for the Lord's work, willing to sacrifice the mariner life that he loved. Little did they know that he was destined to become captain of his own vessel, the Advent Herald, in the South Pacific. Their initial mission service was in the Society Islands, and in 1903, the captain was ordained so he could baptize his many converts. In 1904, the Jones pioneered in Singapore, then in Java, Sumatra, Borneo, and the Malay states. In 1914, when the Adventist Church entered the still primitive Solomon Islands, the Jones volunteered for the job. For some time, their home would be the small mission lodge. They began at once to master the local language, work out the alphabet, and win the confidence of the local populace. 33 days after picking his mission site, Jones opened his school with 34 pupils, including Gaza and Kumana. That Sabbath, he held services for 50 careful instructed islanders, demonstrating his facility and languages by addressing them twice in their native tongue. Afterwards, he convinced a prominent local chieftain to send his sons to the school. One son, a future chief named Catarangoso, eventually directed all Seventh-day Adventist work in the Solomon Islands. Fifth missionary, Ferdinand Anthony Stahl. Ferdinand Anthony Stahl was a Seventh-day Adventist missionary to South America. Along with his wife, Anna Stahl, converted to Seventh-day Adventism in 1902 and trained as a nurse at Battle Creek Sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan. In 1909, the Stahls, along with their children, were sent as missionaries to La Paz, Bolivia, by the General Conference in order to evangelize indigenous communities in the area. In 1911, they moved to the Peru side of Lake Titicaca, establishing schools among the Aymara and the Quechua communities. In 1920, the Stahls moved from Lake Titicaca to the headwaters of the Amazon in Iquitos, Peru, where they established the Metraro Mission Station and launched mission boats downriver. They returned to the United States in 1939. Missionary. Josephine Thelma Cunnington. Josephine Thelma Cunnington was born in Eunice, Indiana on August 24, 1904 as the 10th child of her parents, David and Elizabeth Cunnington. As a child, she was described as having unusual energy. As a young girl, she was said to have enormous ambition and curiosity. And as a young woman, she was described as very vivacious, bright as a dollar, and a real sparkler, a whirlwind of activity. At the age of 18, she married Lowell Adelbert Edwards on May 27, 1923. The two raised two sons, Robert, who was an author and sang professionally for 24 years with the Voice of Prophecy's King's Herald's Quartet with Dr. Charles, who became an author, evangelist, health educator, and departmental leader with youth. Josephine Cunnington began her writing career in 1934 at the age of 30, while a college freshman at Broadview College and Theological Seminary in LaGrange, Illinois, with her first book, Loom o' Life. She had also several periodical articles published during the same time. She wrote and spoke under the combined name of Josephine Cunnington Edwards, of which she became known. She completed her initial college degree in 1944 at the age of 40 with a Bachelor's of Arts in History from Emmanuel Missionary College, now Andrews University, in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Mrs. Edwards was teaching at Oak Park Academy when she and her husband received the call to be missionaries in Africa. The family traveled to Africa to serve as missionaries for 7 years, where she served as principal of Malamula Teacher Training College, Nyasaland, Africa, from 1945 to 1952, while her husband was superintendent and taught ministry. Upon their return, they brought with them 2 African daughters whom they adopted, Alice and Matilda, and an African son named Cameroon. After returning to the States, Josephine was a high school teacher in Ellijay, Georgia from 1957 to 1962 and later taught at Oakwood College, now Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama from 1963 to 1964. In 1964, she was accepted as a history teacher at Gem State Adventist Academy in Caldwell, Idaho. She went on to receive a master's degree from George Peabody College for Teachers in 1962, age 57, and continued with postgraduate studies at the University of Southern California. In 1978, at age 74, she was recognized by Andrews University as Alumna of the Year, and later that same year was awarded an honorary doctorate of human letters degree from the same university for recognition of her long-standing contributions to Christian literature for young people. In October 20, 1970, issue of the Lake Union Herald, it was reported that the author travels 52 weeks a year on speaking engagements and has made several trips to Europe. The same article also states that Edwards was fluent in Portuguese, Spanish, and Greek. Mrs. Edwards can also speak the Zulu dialect of Chinyanga. Josephine retired in 1969 and bought a little home in College Place, Washington. But alas, a quiet life of retirement was hardly a natural consequence for a whirlwind like she. Soon she sold her house and moved to Tennessee, where she spent a number of years on the faculty of Laurel School, a self-supporting academy at Dayton, Tennessee, teaching history and Spanish, and she also aided in the giving of some college classes there in affiliation with Southern College. Finally, in 1984, she moved into a form of final retirement in Milton, Freewater, Oregon. But even there, she managed to teach a class in creative writing at the local community college, and she continued to travel far and wide for speaking appointments before her death on August 14, 1993 at the age of 88. Seventh missionary, Orley Ford and his wife Lillian Schaffer Ford. Orley Ford and his wife Lillian Schaffer Ford were pioneer missionaries in South and Central America. They served in Peru, Ecuador, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and predominantly El Salvador, the country they considered their second home and where they requested to be buried. Orley's pastoral, medical, and administrative services and Lillian's teaching and youth ministries impacted the lives of thousands of indigenous people. Eighth and the last missionary, Eric B. Hare. Eric B. Hare is a name that is cherished worldwide by descendants of the Karen tribe of Myanmar. Eager to begin their mission work, Eric and his wife Agnes arrived in Yangon in 1915 to study the Sgao Karen language. For 6 months, they studied diligently, struggling to learn the high, low, descending, short high, short low, and sing-song notes of this tonal language. The Hares began their work in Ondao by establishing the first Adventist mission school in Myanmar. Despite the challenges of building on property that the villagers believed was haunted by evil spirits, the little school prospered and grew. More schools were built and the gospel began to spread throughout the jungle. In July 2015, 100 years after Eric and Agnes Hare went to Myanmar as missionaries, more than 650 Karen Adventists gathered at Andrews University for a centennial reunion. They reviewed how God had led them in the past and how God is still leading them today. Today, there are more than 2,000 baptized Karen Adventist members scattered throughout North America, worshiping in nearly every state and province. They are interested in reaching out to many thousands of other Karen and Burmese-speaking immigrants and refugees. So, I'm going to share to you my favorite missionary from all that we have discussed. My favorite missionary is Anna Knight. She is my favorite because despite of having all the prejudices faced on her and from her family also, she persevered and continued to be strong in her faith and was strong about Sabbath keeping even though her family pushed her to work on Sabbath. She stood firm and persevered to gain an education despite all the prejudice against her color. I hope you were blessed and I hope you learned all about these 8 missionaries that we discussed today. And may we be inspired by their life work and their dedication to the Lord's work. Bye!